Raider Nation, what's good? Welcome to the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast. The Raiders were back on the field for their first day of practice since kicking off the preseason up in Seattle this week. So that means we're podding again. And today we're talking about the new guy, Thomas Booker IV, because we got eyes on him at practice for the first time since he was traded to the team. And where he lined up was pretty interesting to me. Plus, we'll hit on Jamal Adams. He was real upfront and honest about what he's been through and the opportunity that's in front of him right now with the Raiders as he makes the move from safety to linebacker. And as always, I will have more practice thoughts and takeaways for you as well. So with that, let's get it rolling.
Hey, drop.
Yeah, that's right. We got a new intro for you. How about our editor really hooking it up, huh? Now, we are going to be adding more elements to this podcast as the weeks go on. It's a living, breathing thing, and I'm going to do anything I can to make it more interesting for you guys, both visually and audio as well, so you guys can take it in a lot of different ways. But if you are listening to us, make sure you check us out on YouTube so you can get eyes on that intro. I thought it turned out pretty good. In the meantime, we'll start with Thomas Booker IV, who was out at practice for the first time with the Raiders. Obviously, we saw him in the preseason, which I didn't expect to see. But he said he wanted to show the staff what he could do right away, and he said today, hey, I didn't forget how to play football in a couple of days. Very clearly, the guy played solid ball. I think he impressed me and a lot of you guys at home as well. And today at practice, he was actually taking reps with the ones, mostly at nose tackle, next to Jonah Laulu. Now, I will say that Adam Butler wasn't out there today, so we'll have to wait for an update on him tomorrow after we talk to Pete to see maybe he does return to practice, maybe not, who knows. But not having Adam Butler there, who is their starter at nose tackle, opens the door a bit, and obviously with him, he provides a little versatility in that route as well, does Booker. So he actually took 20 snaps at nose tackle last year, according to PFF at least. That's, something that's in his bag. At 300 pounds, he's a guy that can move around and do a lot of things, but it's an interesting look there because with Booker, Max, Jonah, and Kuntz, it is almost like a bit of a NASCAR package like we've seen in the past when they brought Tyree in there. Those are guys that can move. I mean, Booker in particular, for a guy that's 300 pounds, he seems like he plays faster than the 4.9 that he did run, which 4.9 at 300 pounds is still very impressive to me. But that is still a guy that looks like he can move. He's athletic. Again, can slide around all over the defensive line. He's played on the edge. He's played at 3 technique. He's played at nose tackle. So a real versatile piece for him. But I think going forward, when Adam's healthy, as things get rolling here, I'd imagine we see him more at that 3 technique spot. I think it could end up being a real battle between him and Jonah Laulu, but they do really like Jonah as well, and he looks like a guy that's ready to take that next step. So that battle's going to bear watching, but as I've said multiple times, it's going to be a rotation along that offensive line. They want to be able to rush in waves. Max and Kuntz, probably the only 2 guys that are going to be like the pillars there, and Adam Butler as well. But, in terms of true pillars that aren't rotating a ton. Now, they're going to give, Kuntz a breather, but Max is one of those guys that gets a ton of snaps. But you add Booker into the fold. Again, a guy that's got that versatility that can play anywhere. We'll see where he actually lines up. I think tomorrow will be interesting. They'll likely be in pads, so we'll get to see him really get to work and see the physicality in his game. I'm curious to watch and see kind of what he does. But another guy, and another surprise, honestly, on the D-line was Tonka Hemingway. He was getting some reps with the ones as well. Again, Adam Butler not out there, so that does mix things up a bit. But Tonka Hemingway getting some burn with the top unit. He actually played pretty well in the preseason game, had 3 tackles and 1 pass defense as well. So, clearly, the coaching staff taking note of a solid performance from him. One of the guys that we didn't see out there with the ones today was J.J. Pegues, and he actually got some work early on in that preseason game. Didn't look great, so very clearly the coaching staff giving Tonka the lift because Tonka played well and impressed them on tape. So with Adam Butler out today, he's getting some opportunities as well. So he's an interesting piece to watch. Another athletic, versatile piece, too, for them. They drafted a couple of those guys and also have signed a lot of those very versatile dudes along the defensive line as well. So just an interesting group along the D-line really as a whole. And obviously there's a lot of unproven talent there, so we'll have to see as it goes. We saw in the preseason game that group and the defense as a whole did not do a good job defending the run, in particular setting the edge. So that's going to be something that bears watching going forward in some areas that they really need to fix. Now, speaking of the level behind them and stopping the run, Jamal Adams is a guy that you hope can help a bit in run defense. He's now a linebacker. And today he talked a lot about, the process of being healthy again and getting healthy again, dealing with those injuries. The last couple of years for him have been real rough. He actually told us today that he tore the quad tendon off of his kneecap, which just sounds brutal. Like, no, thank you. I don't want to deal with that. He said his recovery, really, he thought he was going to be able to be back after a year, but it's really like a 2.5 year deal. And so he said he just now feels like himself again, which is an insane road back. I mean, his story of how he even got to the Raiders is pretty wild because, he was sending videos of himself working out to Pete in the offseason, trying to get his attention. And then obviously finally Pete was like, all right, let's bring him in here. And he said that when he met with Pete, he told him, you're going to be in the linebacker room, so get over it. And Jamal's response to that was, all right, well, shit, let's do it. So it's one of those deals where he was just like ready to roll, wanted to be back on a team, saw the opportunity, and was ready to embrace this challenge about playing linebacker. He said he's never even played it, even dating back to Pop Warner. So this is a guy that was always a safety or a linebacker, or safety or a running back, that is, and now is making the transition to linebacker. And so far has looked like a very interesting piece in that group. And then obviously in Seattle, he did mention that they cut him there. Pete and them did. So he's coming in even with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, even though he's grateful for the opportunity. But he wants to be able to show these guys that, like, hey, I'm still that guy, which I think is something that this linebacking core as a whole is trying to do. There's a bunch of guys there in Elandon Roberts, Devin White, and Jermaine Pratt too. All those guys really trying to prove that they can still do it, that they are still those guys. And again, a very interesting mix in that linebacking core when you do go ahead and throw Jamal Adams into it. And he said he's kind of being a sponge and taking in everything that he can. He understands now that it's a bit of a different lens for him, moving down from that safety spot. That's the way he described it. You go from kind of having this worldview that's very expanded, you can see the entire field, to now it's just a little bit tighter. And he said it really, ups the onus on making the right reads so the guards and tackles can't get to him. Obviously, he is not a massive dude. He doesn't have the size that many linebackers do, so you want to avoid getting those guys up on you. So he's got to be quick and explosive, which we have seen at times. I've said multiple times on the podcast and in the newsletter that it's going to be tough for those guys to get a hold of him because he has that explosiveness to his game and the quickness and the speed that he plays with. So he's very aware of that, and he basically said it turns into one of those like see ball, hit ball type of things. And I personally do think he is much better suited to that style of play closer to the line of scrimmage. We saw him be effective that way at times, especially, early on in Seattle. He racked up a decent amount of sacks as well. So that's one of those things where now going forward, it's going to bear watching with him what the usage looks like. Again, I've said multiple times, I think he is going to be more of a rotational guy or a package type guy, but man, very interesting piece. And even Devin White said it as he is trying to prove to the world that, he's back. Pete said that Devin White's back too, but he said that Jamal comes in and look, he said he's going to make guys uncomfortable, and I think that's what he's done because of the athleticism that he brings to the table and the way that he's been out there playing so far. He has impressed me and a lot of other media members, and you guys saw it as well in the preseason opener too. And today, he was working mostly with the twos, which has been the case. He's mixed in from time to time with the ones, but for the most part, he's working with the twos. And the communication was really good pre-snap today. You see him out there making a lot of calls, being very loud. It's very clear that, guys know his name and they know that he can be kind of a leader, especially on that second unit there. And so being vocal has been really cool. It's been cool to see that from him, making those checks and the calls and stuff like that, So with that group, that's exactly what you want to see out of a guy like Jamal Adams, who's been there and done that in the league. But as I noted, comes in very self-aware and realizing like this is an opportunity to prove to the world, to Pete Carroll who cut him, and to this staff and his teammates that like he can still be that guy. So very driven Jamal Adams, which as a Raiders fan, you probably want to hear that. That's how you want that guy to be. And like I said, going to be one of those things where he's mixed in. And I think that's the thing with this defense as a whole. There's a lot of very versatile pieces, and it's going to be so interesting to see how they're used throughout the year. And that's one of those deals where we've talked about the positionless football. Well, from week to week, they can have interesting matchups with so many different things. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch how Patrick Graham and Pete, roll those guys out there and how much the usage is of some of these packages too. The big nickel that we've talked about. Real curious to see that. I'm real curious to see what the snap counts look like for Jamal, when that time comes. It's just going to be interesting and a lot of fun to watch because there is a lot of talent on this defense. Again, I'm not trying to sit here and, pump them up because that first preseason game was not good. We've talked about that. but it is the first preseason game. You don't expect them to have it all figured out. So I'm curious to see what they look like this week, especially in that joint practice with the 49ers. I'd imagine we're going to see more tackling tomorrow when they likely put the pads back on again. And then, because today they were just in helmets. I don't think I clarified that earlier. But when they put on the full pads again, I would imagine that's going down tomorrow. And we'll probably see a bit more of the physicality and more of an emphasis on the tackling. Pete noted that he felt they did stress it enough, but it very clearly didn't show up on tape or in that game as well. So that's an area that they're going to need to fix. But with that, guys, let's get to our practice observations overall from today as well. I watched Trey Tucker a bit when he was running routes, and I like just peeking at guys when they're in individual drills or whether it's like running routes on air, things like that. And today I just happened to watch some of the receivers and Trey Tucker in particular. And, I've said many times, like, I think he's a guy that's ready to kind of really turn some heads at that position as the number 2 receiver, in that room, for those guys. He's been the number 2 guy when they go to 11 personnel. As I've noted many times, Dante Thornton has always been the 3rd receiver in that grouping. But for Trey in particular, that's the guy we're talking about right now. He looked crazy twitchy and fast and has throughout camp. This is nothing new, but it was just one of those things where as you're sitting there watching him and the other receivers go through these drills, it just looks different with him, particularly him versus a lot of the rookies, younger guys in general. And that's how it should look. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they should be on that level, but just so quick in and out of his breaks, for me, is what really stood out. His route running looks super crisp. Again, as I've said multiple times, for him, it was a lot of double clutching with catches and stuff like that. If he has that reined in, which it's looked like he has throughout camp, I haven't seen a lot of that. He could be a guy that's ready to be a much bigger contributor for this team, or at least relied upon much more. There's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, and there's a very clear pecking order. But Trey is going to be a guy that I think will have a nice role in this offense. And again, looks like he's ready to roll. And even Gino said that he reminds him and that he's the spitting image of Santana Moss. So that's really big praises, and that's a guy with a lot of speed, and that kind of leads into our next topic as well. I wanted to talk about Chip and the offense and how, they're keeping things very vanilla right now because they do still have that element of surprise coming up for them in New England. That's why, you see it out there. And again, I know it wasn't good in the preseason game. You still up front need to be able to move bodies and create holes for your running backs, in particular Ashton Genty. Like the first half was just not great, especially from the top unit or top unit / like twos, when they started mixing guys in. So it needs to be better there. Like from a fundamental standpoint, I'm not sitting here saying it was good. It wasn't. And they will admit and have admitted that it wasn't good enough and it needs to be fixed. And I think they're going to really put an emphasis on that. But having said all of that, it is going to be a very vanilla playbook that they're using in the preseason because, like I said, they still have that element of surprise, at their disposal to be able to use against New England because it's the first time that Chip is back in the league and there's all these different things that teams are going to have to really, deal with. And so I think overall, we can't say a ton, obviously, because they are trying to keep things under wraps, and that's part of us being media members and them allowing us to watch the entire practice. We have to keep some things under wraps, but just so you guys know, like there's going to be a lot for the defense to have to think about with Chip Kelly in this offense. They've got a lot of interesting pieces. Like we talked to Philip Dorsett today, and he said that Chip has done a really good job of meshing elements of a pro-style offense and the spread that he's obviously more widely known for, particularly with his time in Oregon. That's a label that's kind of followed him, but I think he's really meshed those things. You look back to Ohio State, and it was much more of a marriage between those two systems, and now he's bringing that here. And again, he has just done a really good job of getting guys open in space, and that was something Philip Dorsett said when I asked him what sticks out to him about this offense and the way Chip does scheme things up, and he just said that there's going to be a lot of plays to be had for guys who are fast and can make plays in space. So, like, he's going to get the ball to these dudes with some room to run around, and, it's going to be exciting to watch. I'm looking forward to when Chip can actually open the full playbook in a real game situation. And again, we won't see that until the opener, which is the way that it should be. Like everyone's playing vanilla ball in the preseason, but particularly, and Pete did touch on this, they want to keep it as vanilla as humanly possible. So nobody has a book on them out of the gates because they want to be able to start fast. And who wouldn't? Some other takeaways today. I know everybody, went nuts on Aidan in that game. He did play much better in the second half. People need to realize that. A lot of people calling for his head, saying that, look back to last year and all these different things. Like, he is the backup. I don't think he's in any danger of being unseated as the number 2 quarterback for this team, nor do I think he should. And that's just my read on the way the coaching staff is treating this. I don't think he's going to be unseated for that second spot, and I personally don't think he should either. And we'll get into that in a second. But it is worth noting, after I just said he's probably secure as the number 2 guy, he did have a turnover where they play today. The DB wasn't able to come down with it. You didn't like seeing that. But overall, he has had a good camp. Like, I want to make sure I mention that because he's looked good. You got to give him the flowers on that. It's different to do it in a game, and I know you guys only get to see the game. You don't get to see the practices unless you're out here and available when they do have the open practices, but he has had a very good camp and has looked very comfortable. Just needs to do it for the world to see and show you guys what he can do. But just keep in mind, it is the first preseason game. He is also in a new system with a new play caller, trying to figure this stuff out as well. So give the guy a little bit of grace and realize that if all goes well, you won't have to see him out on the field. He'll just be, a decent backup quarterback, which I do think he is. And the reason why I say that he's not going to be unseated as the number 2 is not a knock on Cam. Cam Miller in particular has looked really good. He just looks like a nice developmental project for the Raiders. Like, I don't think he's ready to be the number 2 or the number 2 quarterback. You don't want him as your primary backup right now. At least that's the way I feel about it from having watched him. Now, I will say he has looked more and more comfortable as the weeks have gone on. You guys all saw it in the game. But again, they're not doing anything insane out there. And I know it was the similar play calling for Aidan, so I know people are going to freak out and say, well, what about that? I get it. He outplayed Aidan in the smaller sample size, but he also was playing against a lot of threes and a lot of guys that likely won't make an NFL roster. So people need to take that into account. And I'm not trying to take away what he did because it was very impressive. And even today, to end practice, he ended it with a beautiful fade ball in the back right corner of the end zone to Justin Shorter, and he actually hauled it in with one hand. So that was the play of the day easily, and it came on the last play of the day, and it was courtesy of Cam. Obviously, he has the big deep ball as well in the game to Shedrick Jackson, and then you go and do this in practice again, and we'll see if he kind of keeps stacking days. But I think this staff likes what they have in Aidan, and this is me just giving you my read on what I've seen from being at practice, talking to the coaches, seeing the way people interact with him, and the way the offense moves at practice when we've seen them there. I think that they feel very comfortable with Aidan as their number 2 quarterback. And to me, I see them realizing and feeling like Cam Miller is going to be a developmental guy who has some really interesting pieces and, again, has looked good as the weeks have gone on. The more that's been thrown on his plate, the more reps he's gotten, the better he's gotten. And he said that he is, a rhythm-type player. And when he's been able to get into a rhythm, we've seen him play pretty well. So I want to see what he does, not only in the joint practices, although I do think a lot of the 1s and 2s are going to get the bulk of the reps against those teams, against that team, the 49ers. But I am curious to see how much Cam Miller gets in that 49ers game, what the workload looks like for him. Pete did say we're going to see the starters more in that game. I would imagine, we're probably going to see a quarter out of them. And if that's the case, that'd be great because we'll have a much larger sample size to talk about. But particularly with Cam Miller, I want to see more than, what did he have, 7 pass attempts, if I remember right? I want to see the guy get more burn, and I want to see what we can do consistently in those game-type situations. But like I said, in practice so far, I have been impressed. He has looked better and better as the days have gone on. Still has rookie moments here and there, which is to be expected. But, have been impressed with him, and you guys got to see a little bit of that in the game. And also today, too, it is worth noting, we talk about Pete and the energy that he brings all the time. They ran a little tush-push at one point, and he even hopped on the tush-push pile. It was hilarious. Pete hates talking about his age, and everybody loves to talk about it. But, the energy and the vibes that he brings to practice on a daily basis are just off the charts, and it is different than a lot of the previous coaches that have been with the Raiders before. With Antonio Pierce, it was always a good vibe, but then things obviously took a turn, and we haven't gotten to the season yet. Does it still have the same vibe if things don't quite go their way? Only time will tell, and I know you guys at home don't want to find out if that is the case, but so far from what we've seen with Pete, always bringing the juice every day. Dylan Lobby talked about how he feeds off of that, and a lot of the guys on the team do, and you just love seeing it. And I was talking with another media member today. I don't know what that guy does at 73 to have that kind of energy, but I know me and all of you at home probably hope that we're as active and as juiced up on a daily basis as he is at that age, because it is, very, very impressive. But anyway, guys, that's all we got for you today. We will be back out there tomorrow morning for practice bright and early. They likely, like I said, will be in full pads. They have Monday off, so I would imagine they're going to kind of kick things up a bit, in terms of the physicality. They've usually ramped it up a bit when they have the next day off. Maybe they take it a little easier since they have the 49ers coming to town and they've got a 3-day stretch of practice there. I don't know. I'm curious to see what they do, but I'd imagine we'll see them in full pads, and I think we'll be seeing them pop a little bit more and maybe working on more wrap-ups as well. But do make sure you tune in after practice for another episode of our podcast, as we always do here during training camp. When the Raiders practice, we do podcasts, so we will have one for you then. And as I always say, guys, if you aren't already subscribed to our newsletter, do make sure you check that as well. It's a great compliment to this podcast. You can head to silverandblacksportsnetwork.com and subscribe to get that one delivered right to your inbox every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 a.m. It's like clockwork. That's when we got it. You guys know when to expect it, and the response from that has been great. So make sure you join the rest of the Raiders fans who have hopped in on that community that we're building so you can have access to that. And as always, make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast wherever it is that you are listening to it, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other hundreds of podcast services that we are on. I've made sure it's distributed to everywhere so that anybody and everybody can get it. If for whatever reason you know somebody out there who hasn't been able to find it, let me know. We'll try and find out a way to get it to them. But as always, if you liked what you heard, please do hit us with that 5-star review and leave a comment as well. Please, those things help a ton. It really helps the growth of the channel and keeps us rolling and makes it available and pushes it into more people's algorithms so we can keep this thing growing. So anyway, guys, like I said, we'll be back out here tomorrow after the practice as well for another podcast, and then we'll take the day off on Monday, and then we are hitting it. We're getting closer to the second preseason game and those joint practices as well. We'll catch you next time.